Welcome, Motion Makers, to the Motion Makers podcast. I'm Amber, and this is Josie Watson.
Hello.
I brought Josie on to talk today because we are going to talk about, I've said that there are 4 things that it takes to become a motion maker. The first is to have a hope for a better future. The second is a personal value system. The third is participation in that hope. And the fourth is to not do it alone. And I think that Josie's story really illustrates that. So we're going to get into that a little bit today. And also because Josie is the reason why we're doing Cultivating Kentucky at all. So also she's my mother-in-law, so I just like to talk to her when I can. Josie,
Yes.
who are you and what do you do?
Oh my gosh, who am I? That's a good question. I'm me.
Yep.
I'm retired. What do? I do a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to figure out what to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's Ricky. He's been very instrumental in everything that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I guess really practically my whole life. And my kids. I have Izzy's on Main, Bells and Whistles down here in Morganfield, Kentucky, which keeps me connected to the community,
Mm-hmm.
which I love. So that's about all I do.
So you're a business owner
Yes.
and a wife
Yes.
and a mom
Yep.
and a grandma.
Yep.
How many grandkids do you have?
11.
I should know that answer. 11.
11. Yep.
So I really wanted to have the next conversation be with you because Nolan and I, in the episodes that we've already done, have fleshed out like what it takes to have an active hope for a better future and to have a personal value system and like what that looks like. And those are things like my experience with you and all of the things that you do are that you have those things. And then the third step is a participation in that hope. And so can you tell us a little bit about like your history, like what brought you to where you are now? And then we'll kind of talk through that and
On a
what your
personal level or on a
Let's start
living
on a,
here in Kentucky level, or
we'll start personal.
what brought me here? Well, I actually grew up, went to school with a girl who lived here,
Mm-hmm.
Tina Pickman. Her and her family grew up down the street from us,
Mm-hmm.
and when they moved away, they kind of went to different places, and I always went to visit. And one of the places I went to visit them was here in Kentucky, and I stayed for a little while.
So that brought you to Morganfield.
Yeah, yep.
Cool.
Technically Uniontown.
Uniontown. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yep.
And then over the years, you ended up coming back to live here because you met Ricky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And we got me and the kids all moved back here in the early 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Been here ever since.
So when you retired for the first time,
Yeah. That's when I
You-
moved down here.
Uh-huh. Okay, so then when you retired from the courts, you started Ground on Main, right?
Yes. Yeah. We started Ground on Main because our whole idea, my goal was always when we retired that we create something for adults with disabilities because, of course, Rob, one of the roadblocks that we had was not having any place for him to work.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up all his life working in family business and working in cafes and doing that sort of thing. And I went the route of trying to get Voc Rehab to try to create something to help with the area, and that was unsuccessful, so we decided to do it ourselves.
Okay, so let's talk about Rob. How old were you when you had Rob?
I was 21.
Oh, you were 21. I thought you were younger than that. And Rob was not your first kid.
No.
So when you had Rob, you had Tasha.
Yeah, Tasha's older than Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had Tasha,
So I had
and
Tasha
then you
and
had
Rob. Mm-hmm.
And what year was Rob born? 1985.
1985.
So what was it like having a baby with Down syndrome in 1985?
It was different, I think, than there wasn't as much knowledge as there is here. If it wasn't for a nurse in the hospital who actually talked to me and gave me information, there was really nothing available to parents. She, gave me a book to read and information, and which thank goodness for that lady, because I wouldn't have known anything. The doctors, because he was also a preemie, there wasn't a whole lot of, they weren't able to give you anything other than the genetic side. And, if he lives to be 10 months old, he should be good. That's all they could tell me.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's pretty much all they told me.
Right.
There wasn't a lot available.
So how did you find out he had Down syndrome? Did you find out immediately when you had him?
No.
Okay.
Well, they did. We knew something was up just because of the way the doctors. Until a couple days after I had him, and they had a meeting in a conference room with all these doctors and specialists, and like I said, that's really basically they sat down, told us he had Down syndrome, and basically the only thing they could say was, like I said, that was when they told us that.
That if he made it past 10 months, then he should be okay.
Yep.
And what does be okay look like for him in
That he would live.
1985? That he would live.
Yeah.
Okay. So not having resources or knowledge, like thankfully you did have that nurse. Another thing that you've told me about when you had Rob is how your mom was also.
My mom was very supportive. My biggest fear when I had Rob, that my mother would not be supportive, that she would just this is a cause of, the devil, I mean, she just didn't, understand a lot of that.
Yeah.
Back in that day too, people thought people who were epileptic were possessed.
Right.
I mean, you know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
So it was kind of, and I understood different, because I understood what they were telling me, but she was very supportive. She was, she was the one who was always there for Rob.
Yeah.
And pushed me to push him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to that a little bit. Like, how did your mom push you to push him?
To just be normal, if that makes sense. I'll never forget when he was younger. We lived in the same subdivision. But I would walk with him and the kids down to my mom's house because they weren't that far away. And one day, she had me do it by himself. And I'll never forget that, because once he got to the end of our street, I couldn't see him anymore.
Yeah.
But she could see him from.
Because it's an L.
Yes.
Yeah. So where you couldn't see, she could see.
Yeah. And I think it was the hardest thing I ever did, was let him take that walk by himself. It was probably, a quarter mile. And that was, she says, you got to do it. You got to do it. He can do it. And yeah, my mom pushed me to do that.
Yeah, she would tell everybody that story that would listen.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the beginning of something.
Yeah.
It for sure was.
She's crying on the phone, I'm crying on the phone. But, he did it. And, and I think it was his first step towards independence.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
that,
How old was he, do you think?
He was about 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7, 8 years old, I think.
That
I
makes
don't know. He might have been younger than that. No, he was probably. For some reason, in my head, I'm thinking he was 8 years old.
That sounds like it would be right.
Yeah.
Because just knowing the ages of your kids and having heard this story many
Yeah.
times, I think that's probably right.
That was, I think that was that was definitely a defining moment in his life.
Yeah. Do you think he knows, though? I think you know that, and your mom knew that, but he probably doesn't know that.
No. I mean, Ron was,
Because to him, you guys made that normal then.
yeah. And he did a lot of, so when he was younger, I let him ride a mini bike.
You were just telling me that. Yeah.
I think back and I'm thinking,
What were you
what
thinking?
was I thinking? But
I'll tell you.
He did what the other kids did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
He learned to ride a bicycle. And a lot of children like him never learned to ride a bicycle. But he learned, the other kids learned to ride a bicycle. He learned to ride a bicycle. He never learned how to watch for traffic, but he learned how to ride a bicycle.
I do know that to be true because sometimes we
He's
cross
still
the
don't.
street
He
right
still
here and I'm
won't.
like, Rob, what are you doing? You're
Yeah.
gonna get run over.
Yeah.
So the reason why I want to talk about Rob and this story in particular is because I know that like your hope for a better future was a hope for a future for Rob where he knew his ability and his capabilities and where he was included.
Yeah.
And so then, like what I'm trying to lead to here is that I know that probably from the moment of that walk, like you say that was a defining moment in his life, I would assert that that's also a defining moment in your life because now you look for the opportunities for him to have that again and again and again to the point that you create it because you created it with Ground on Maine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and he's done, I never did tell you a story about the boat.
No, I don't know that one. Yay, new stories, let's go.
Well, one of the things we always had a problem with, and that has to do with inclusion, segregation kind of thing, like playgrounds.
Hmm.
Parents would take their kids away if he went there to play, like they were going to catch something from him, or in the pool, or stuff like that. So when we were camping, Higgins Lake, and we had the boat, always parked the boat out in the water, out from where we camped,
Yeah.
but we always had a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So the kids would all go to the playground and play. Well, they came back one day without him.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
4. He was 4 years old.
Oh no.
And like, oh my gosh, where's Rob? And so we went, everybody went crazy trying to find Rob. But I found him walking the shoreline looking for the boat. He was 4 years old. He was walking that shoreline. He was looking for that boat
Because he knew where to go.
because he knew the boat.
Yeah.
It was a pretty big boat. You could spot that boat. And he was looking for that boat. That's how he found it.
Huh.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's 4 years old.
Yeah, I have a,
So, it gives you that he's capable of so much more than we
Yes.
think he can think. Even to this day, because he's not very verbal, he doesn't express, but
I think also, even like speaking to him and his expression, he's even more verbal than a lot of us give him credit for. It just takes the right listening.
right.
And, like, he will be more verbal if you're doing the right things to pull him out of himself, And I think that also speaks to probably because your mom did that day. And then now you've kind of lived out that hope for him, like one small step at a time. And you still do. I mean, he's 38, 39?
39.
He's 39, and you still hold him to accountability and responsibility like that, and capability. And he is now just like an active member of the community, which I think is the hope that you've had for him
Yeah.
all along.
Yeah, and he still needs to be more active. I mean,
There's always room for improvement, right?
yeah. I guess I keep wanting more.
And that's kind of the good thing, right? Because then
Yeah.
I think if you stop wanting more, then you're not participating in the hope anymore.
Yeah.
So when you started Ground on Maine, your hope was to give him a job, right?
Yeah, create a job for him.
And then from there, you saw how to create a job for him. And then you started looking for opportunities to create jobs for other, because you did Special Olympics. And so you had other adults with disabilities that were your athletes, right?
Yeah.
And so then that created Bells and Whistles, right?
Right, because we did the art classes over there for adults with disabilities, because they used to have one, and when that kind of fell through the grant stuff, a bunch of us parents got together that had the same visions for theirs, and hired a teacher to continue doing it.
Doing the art class.
As a matter of fact, they did it in my dining room for quite a few years, for at least 5 years,
Yeah.
and then we moved into.
Bells and Whistles.
Actually moved into a place in town, and I got too hard going up and down the stairs, so we got that building and did it for the art class. And we wanted to create a workspace. That was what Bells and Whistles originally was intended for, to do that they could have their own business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But again, it's getting the support and facilitation. That's always a hard part, I think, with anything. And that was,
I think one of the things that you've taught me over the years is that you have the hope for the better future, that big dream. So like for Cultivating Kentucky, because it kind of went for you from Ground on Main to Bells and Whistles, and now we're trying to do Cultivating Kentucky, right? One of the things that's really important to you in Cultivating Kentucky is just creating more of those spaces of inclusivity. But you've kind of added to that dream now, not just inclusivity, but also connection, so that other spheres in the community are connecting with each other, right? And I think that, so I guess what I'm trying to articulate is that you've taught me over the years to have that big dream. Like you had that dream for Bells and Whistles to be something specific, and you have then taken the next step to get it to be what it is, which doesn't mean that the big dream is always going to be what it looks like, but because you're taking those steps, that participation in the hope, you're moving towards something daily.
yeah, it didn't pan out to how I anticipated, what my vision was there. But it's still,
It's still an important aspect
yes,
of the community.
Yes, it's but want it being more of a community, although, granted, that was a little more personal for me to start with,
Yeah.
with all my athletes and stuff. We just didn't get the participation from the families, from their families. But as a community, I guess it made me start thinking more of the community as a whole needing the same thing. And third space is a big thing, which is kind of what that was. I don't know. It's a hard thing, getting everybody to work together. I always said God didn't put us here by ourselves. He gave us everybody else because we're supposed to be working with everybody else.
Yeah.
But, it's trying to figure out how that was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that that's how your vision has developed, really, because now you're looking to how can we connect everybody to each other.
Because we have a lot of good programs in this area. We have a lot of, when I ask people, what do you think about with it, what do you think when you think of a community center? Everybody's always basketball, volleyball, which, we need that. But we already have that here. Problem is, we already have that here. We have the tennis courts, we have volleyball, we have basketball, we have, the FFA, we have all this stuff. The problem is they don't all interconnect. As a community. It's not inclusive, I think is a big thing. Most of the things we have going on are pretty segregated. Trying to figure out a way to make everything more inclusive, even if you have to adapt, do adaptive things and create separate little pod programs, but so that the entire community can benefit and access these resources. It's not clear yet how we can do that, but I know it can be done. We just have to figure out how we can do it.
Which brings us back to like small steps.
Right.
Like
Well,
showing
that's
up.
like with Rob. That was always the thing when you have segregation in the school system. It's fine and it's great, except for at some point in time they have to live in the real world.
Right.
Then what do we do?
Right. Well, actually, I did want to talk about that a little bit because once he made it to school, then we're like actively working on showing him what he was capable of. But then he went into a system where he wasn't shown that, right? That wasn't valued to the same aspect as it was at home.
No, as a matter of fact, his very first day of school was in a satellite segregated program where it was from kindergarten to 6th grade. And I'm like, well, I don't know how that, well, and they're saying, well, don't worry, we have him in a corner fenced with a little barricade, so he's back there by himself. And, mine's like, well, I really don't think that's good either.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound great.
So, they were a little upset when I pulled them because I disrupted that program because it just wasn't good for any of them. I mean, there are, everybody It's always been the problem with the school system, period. Everybody's different. I don't care if you have a disability or not. Everybody learns different. Everybody is different.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And I know it's hard for the system to give everybody what they need,
Yes.
because everybody needs something different.
Yeah, no one system could give
No,
everybody
no.
what they need, ever.
And that's your home.
Yeah.
Needs to
Fill that.
fill that gap.
Correct.
Which, doesn't always happen.
But
So-
we can try to work towards better systems that meet
Yeah.
better needs. Because, okay, so Rob started in the satellite program and you pulled him. So then what did that look like after you pulled him from there? Where did he go?
I pulled them into Lansing.
Lansing schools.
And the school system fought me. I mean, they tried to haul me to jail for it.
Really?
Yeah. Because I pulled him out of that system. And, I knew my rights
Mm-hmm.
because, basically, you had to have them in school.
Right. Okay. Also, is this before, is it the ADA passed?
This was after the ADA.
Oh, no, it's FAPE I'm thinking about. Free and appropriate public education. This is after that.
This was after the IDEA.
Okay. Okay.
The IDA was the inclusive aspect of, and
Yes.
that was passed in the 70s.
Okay.
It was just never implemented.
Right.
And one of the problems at the school, which, the school he was in was a very advanced school system,
Yes.
but it was a rural area school system.
Yes.
But, getting them to understand that it was a funding issue. They were getting funding for the satellite. They weren't getting funding for in-house. Because they weren't getting funding for the in-house because they weren't following the guidelines.
Right.
So I had to pull him out. Well, I still fought with them to get them. And they actually only pulled him out for a year, and then they opened up a spot for him to come back.
So why'd they try to take you to jail?
Because I pulled him out, put him in, and it was, they let you, the court systems understood the problems.
Yeah.
So they would, basically, I had to appoint his grandfather as his guardian for educational purposes, which was specific in his guardianship. But, the school doesn't understand the legality of, that was for educational purposes only. And so they tried to say that we were lying, he wasn't living there, which he didn't have to. He was there for educational purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of stuff. So yeah, they sent. Yeah, it was quite a mess.
Okay, so he.
They wanted them, but they didn't want them, but they didn't want them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, so.
And so then here you are, his mother, what is the best situation for my son, who
Mm-hmm.
is very different than any of these other children, but still has needs, still is capable, and needs to be shown that he is capable. So eventually, I know down the line, he ended up in a different school district in a program where you said that they just weren't treating him right either.
That was actually back in the original Glenn DeWitt school system.
Into it. That's where they put him in a closet.
Yeah, that was a special education teacher who did that. She did it to students when they didn't behave. She'd lock them in a closet. And I could tell there was, Rob was never very verbal.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rob, we knew when he was younger, before he started school, I took sign language because I knew that's what we were going to have to use with Rob. But when he started school, nobody knew sign language, so that kind of fell apart. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's always been a barrier for him.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell there was something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but he couldn't tell me what was wrong. So I just started going to the school every day and trying to see what was wrong. And, they tried to ban me from the school. I'm like, unless, you're going to ban every other parent, you can't ban me.
Yeah. So here's what I want people to hear in this story is that sometimes participating in the hope that you believe in, it's not easy.
Mm-mm.
It's not like one next step into the next. It's a lot of times fighting, helping people understand what they don't understand. It's knowing what you value is and what is right and what is truth and working towards that, because those were his experiences as a child. But because you fought that system when he was younger, then when I had my eldest son Julius, and he has special needs different than Rob has, but then he was in the same school district. So when we started advocating for Julius generation later, you were able to see a new perspective of the district, right?
Right, I saw the difference. You know, because when you're trying to make the change, you don't see it. You don't even benefit from it because it's a constant fight.
Right.
You know, but it was nice seeing with Julius, I saw how far they've come. And it's like it, you know, kind of makes me feel better, even though I know Rob didn't benefit from it.
Right.
But some other people are.
But you and Rob really, not just you and Rob, but what you did was not small, because it laid a foundation for this generation, because it's not just Julius and myself as his mom
Right.
who's advocating. Like,
Yeah.
there's other kids in the district that the entire district is benefiting, whether they have special needs or not. Everybody benefits from inclusivity, which is another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, because another thing that you did when Rob was little was you started Special Olympics.
Rob was in special. I was part of a Special Olympics group when he was younger in Michigan. He was, and he participated in that all his life. So when we moved to Kentucky, there wasn't anything here. You know, it's a funding. You know, there's a lot of goes on keeping a Special Olympic program going.
Yeah.
And there was one in Henderson, but they wouldn't allow anybody in this area to join it. It was kind of a little segregated pod itself. So we started, me and a couple other parents here in town started our own.
Right.
And we started off with mostly Union County. We had I think there was 6 of them. And by the time I retired in 2019, we had 70 athletes. Wow. But we were Webster, Henderson, and Union County, because there was just so many. Most of them were adults. They don't have anything else to do. You know, and Special Olympics itself is a segregated kind of, except for they have unified. And when Rob was younger, he was always in unified programs because his entire family was in Special Olympics. You know, they were unified partners.
Talk about what that is a little bit for somebody that
Unified
doesn't know.
partners with Special Olympics is with, you know, anybody. I mean, you can be a unified partner.
So it's where a person with special needs would partner
With
with a
somebody without
unified
it.
partner. And so, okay, I super want to talk about that, because
And that makes it more inclusive.
yes,
But
and
again, that's a hard,
it's always hard to manage things like that.
well, it's the stigma.
Yeah.
You know, my kids, I had enough kids that they were all unified partners and they made a whole team.
Yeah.
I always said I had that many
You made
kids
your own
to
team.
give Rob his, you know. So he was used to having the unified stuff,
Yeah.
which we never really got it going real well here in Kentucky. Because, you know, ideally you pull kids from the school system, get the school systems involved. But, you know, a lot of kids are, you know, I don't want them to be associated with somebody special. You know,
Yeah.
they feel like,
Well, okay, let me pause you there, because ideally, yes. But let's talk about what really happened, because what I can see as an outsider coming into your family, like, you know, later, after all of your kids had been unified partners. When I met Jake, he's your youngest son, right?
yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so when I met Jake, he had been a unified partner for years by then. And he is just a very different person because of that experience.
Oh, yeah.
Like, his value system was created because of that. His experiences were created because of that. I think he's a better leader because of that. Like, he is the man that he is today because he had that experience, because his older brother had Down syndrome, and you held him to that hope, and then you taught every kid after that hope, and that was just intrinsic to Jeremy, Jacob, Alexandra, Zachary. Everybody believes what you believed for Rob, even though when he was born, that wasn't a typical belief system.
Yeah, because again, we have that with all aspects. Again, I keep leaning outside of Rob, but segregation is segregation. We've segregated, habitually for race, gender, economics, even weight issues, and we tend to segregate people for every little thing, and we don't, religion. We segregate one religion from another. How do we stop that? How do we become? How do we become a whole community? And you're never going to get there. I mean, everybody's been fighting this for years. All you can do is get a little bit closer, get a little bit closer, get a little bit closer.
It's those next steps. It's
Yeah.
that participation. So also another aspect of participating in that hope is it's very small decisions, one after the other. Like deciding to, I'm sure it was not easy to decide to take Rob out of one school and put him in another and do it over and over again. I'm sure it wasn't easy to decide, like, okay, we're going to do Special Olympics, which then required something more of you because then you became a volunteer yourself, and then eventually you were directing the thing.
Actually, I started off directing here
Oh.
because there wasn't one here.
Right.
But I had some great, Phyllis and Kelly. I mean, they were,
Awesome.
yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
And they still are.
And Debbie, at the time, Debbie was really involved, and I mean, they were, and they, from the get-go, we'll be there to help, and they were.
Yeah.
We did it. But,
Which brings us to our fourth aspect of being a motion maker. So we said that you have to have the hope of a better future. A value system, which we said your values are inclusivity, connection, capability, ability. So you have the value system. You participate in that hope, like one small step at a time, just bringing you a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And then the fourth thing is to not do it alone.
right, you can't do it alone.
You can't
I mean,
do it
you can't do it alone. I mean, I never could have done, anything alone. You can't. I guess that's why we have spouses. I don't know. Although sometimes you're still doing it alone.
Yeah, well, you're right, though, because Ricky is honestly probably the most incredible person you could have had to help you with this journey with Rob and all of the other kids. And you didn't do it alone also with your kids, because your kids all participated with you all the time. I mean, when I met Jake, Jeremy and Jake were both coaches in Michigan, and Rob didn't even live in Michigan anymore.
Yeah,
they just continued.
Yeah.
Actually, Zach was also participating, and Rob still didn't even live in Michigan. So they continued to participate. And then, and because of that, each of them individually have connections from that one decision that you made. My kids are going to do this with Rob, right? That's one decision that one person made. And Jake has friends from that time that are completely unrelated to Rob even. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we all now have this sphere of better connection because of one, probably seemingly at the time, small decision.
Yeah, you don't see it.
You don't see it till after.
It's just like with anything, when any choice you make as an individual, your whole circle around you affects them. Whether it's giving up drugs or giving up smoking or giving up whatever, changing your lifestyle to a certain extent, it changes everybody in that circle, because now they see what you're doing, you're influencing them, then they influence the others, and it can snowball. But just one person. And I think people get discouraged when it's just the one person, but that one person affects so many people. That be glad for that one person.
Yeah, exactly. So what I hope that listeners will hear from this conversation is not to take your small steps that you're making towards your hope for granted. Like, those steps that feel small right now are bigger than you can imagine, and you may not see it for a long time, because Rob is 39 years old. You could have not had any idea that it would have ripple affected the way that it did. But even with Izzy's on Main right now, there are people that it is still rippling out to the community. And that's what makes you the motion maker and community builder that you are. It was just small steps.
Yeah, and I think people have to realize some insignificant thing that they do, good or bad,
Mhm.
has a lot of effect, has a ripple effect,
Mhm.
you know. Which, you know, we kind of always hear that,
Mhm.
more to the bad than the good,
Right.
but, you know, everything has a ripple effect.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast today. I'm sure you'll be
Thank
on
you for
again.
having me.
Yeah.